Hello. Hey, everybody. Can I get everyone's attention for a second? Everybody out there, maybe let people behind you know that we've got some stuff going on. We're going to do our first talk here today, and this is my good friend Cliff. He is an amazing, amazing model maker. He's going to blow your mind with the stuff this guy knows. Cliff's done work in film, stage, tons of stuff over the years. Super, super talented. I met Cliff at Comic Expo, and Cliff's become like a mentor for me. If any time I'm stuck, I don't know something, I actually have somebody I can call now. I've never had that before. It's always been trying to figure it out. So to have Cliff is amazing. So anyways, Cliff's going to have a talk here for you. If you'd like to come down and listen, that's fine. If you want to keep visiting out there, that's fine too. And yeah, I'm going to hand the mic over to Cliff. He's going to talk for a bit, and I think he's going to let you guys ask some questions if you have anything you'd like to know. And Cliff's booth is right there with all the crazy molds and it's awesome. It's great. So, okay, you good?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. I speak louder than this guy does, so I'm known to have a big mouth. So, anyways, I'm not going to do a lot of talking. I'd rather you ask questions because it's a half hour. A half hour, I won't even be getting started. I've been a miniaturist and model maker my entire life. I started building models when I was 6. Aircraft as usual. Star Wars happened in 1977, and I started scratch building, whatever I can find. Most crafters understand that when you see something, you look at it and go, I know what that can become, and you make it. And I was doing that in the 70s. I had a short stint in film, and I learned so much in film and that, and I brought it into my real world work. I ended up working for myself for 16 years, building models professionally for the oil patch, for architects, and still in film as a contractor and that. Learned everything from mold making, casting, sculpting. I do it all. Adam Savage, if you guys, who watches Adam Savage and doesn't love the guy? Yeah. I've been watching him since the Mythbusters days. Come and talk to me at my table about a Mythbusters story. It's pretty cool. Mythbusters ILM story, to be exact. Adam is a mentor. I met him once, but not through this means. And that he is a mentor of mine because of his attitude towards making. And it's because I had the same attitude, and I didn't even know who he was at the time. When I was young, and that I had model clubs and stuff because I wanted to share everything that I learned with everybody else. With young people, people my age, people older, all genders, it didn't matter. I wanted to teach what I've learned through trial and error. I work in almost all mediums. One of the few that I don't is steel. I can weld a couple of things together, but it's not pretty. I've made armatures for dinosaurs. They were covered up with clay. You didn't have to look at it. It was pretty ugly. So anyways, I got to know Sean because he was at Expo I think it was almost 2 years ago. It was the first one after the pandemic, so it was really tiny. And I saw his tabletop stuff. And I've never been much of a tabletop gamer, but they're miniatures. The miniature world has fascinated me my entire life. And I started scratch building stuff, like I said, when I was young. And a couple of the items I have up here are for a patron of mine, and he's here somewhere, and I was going to embarrass him. Mike Hardy, and that is a good friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time, 30 years. And he contracts me to build miniatures for his tabletop gaming. So he does 28 mil primarily. He writes his own skirmishes. He has an Old West town. He's got some Oriental versions and stuff as well. So that this thing here is for a paddock, a rice paddock, in a skirmish that he does. I'm not sure where it takes place and stuff. It all takes place usually around the turn of the 19th century, around there. So the Western stuff is spaghetti Western. And then he does, he's now getting into a 1920s kind of pulp thing, so I'm going to be building him a warehouse, which is the beginnings of this guy here. Just starts with MDF. I'll show you the Nanhai trading post. Can you still hear me? This is entirely made of basswood. It's completely playable. The lid comes off. There's stairs leading up to the top. The loading hatches actually open. This floor comes off, you can play on that floor. I paint
as if it's real world when I do my stuff. So one of the things that I try to teach with my painting is don't be symmetrical. Nothing in the world is symmetrical, it's asymmetrical. So coloration, there's the rule of thirds that's used in art and photography and stuff. Believe it or not, the world's kind of set up that way too. It's pretty weird. So when I'm painting, you can see on the boards here, there's a stain coming through the cracks. That stain would be from the creosote that they use because this sits in water. They don't use creosote anymore for buildings and poles that sit in water because it's really poisonous. But back when this would have been built, that's what it is. This is just a regular wood stain. And I let it soak through this side. Just let it do its thing. The house is, or the trading post is built with actual slats. So if you put up the light, you can see light through the slats. This isn't a tropical place. They didn't build the way we do with insulation and that sort of stuff. There was air coming through the walls all the time. So I built it in that tradition. When I build something like this, Mike gives me an idea. It's just doing something that looks good. I hit the web and I find buildings in the period, and sometimes I draw them out, sometimes in white. It sends me a sketch, just like that. So that's the floor plan for this warehouse. And this warehouse is really organized. I'm going to model off the back. So the whole exterior is going to be brick. There's going to be a railway track inside it. It's going to house a flat cart for his skirmishes and such. Doing good, 10 minutes. That's all I talk. See, I'm not going to talk anymore. Ask whatever you want to know. I can't answer, I can't. Please, ask questions. Let's keep this going. We've got 20 minutes. With no hands, come on.
What do you use for your references on everything? Like, do you have like places that you go to? Do you go to reference books? Do you go to the internet? Do you go to movies? Do you go
Everything. Yeah. Let me come at this now. I use as much as I can. Pinterest is awesome because there's no baloney on Pinterest. There's no nasty comments. It's just loads of reference. Sometimes the images are really good. Sometimes they're really lousy. The wonderful thing about living in today's age is the internet. When I started making this stuff, there was no internet. And I had to literally use every resource, every book I can find. I have a massive library of the making of every movie you can imagine. And I dive into those deep dives at magnifying glasses. Now I have magnifying glasses and reading glasses at the same time. So a prime example, when I was a kid and I started scratch building, saw Star Wars. In 1978, Lucasfilm released a book called The Art of Star Wars. And I still have the original releases. They're falling apart and they're brutally dog-eared. And getting some feedback there, sorry. I would examine every photo that they had of the effects models and stuff, and anything I could find that I would use. Sorry, guys. It's my body. You still hear me? Yeah, okay, there we go. I think that did it. Yeah, thanks. I think it was in 1979 when Alien came out. I wasn't of age, but my uncle worked for the theater and he snuck me in, and that movie terrified me. I was ruined by it, and I didn't do well with horror when I was a kid. But the tech that was in that movie, the sets, the model of the Nostromo and the refinery, the design, and then they brought out a book called The Book of Alien, which was released in 1980. And I saw it in the bookstore, grabbed it, and it had Ron Cobb's stuff in there, Chris Foss's stuff in there, and I would just pour over these images and start making stuff just from whatever I saw in the pictures. And then around 1982, a magazine was formed called Cinefex. Rest in peace, Cinefex. COVID just killed the company, unfortunately. It's really sad. Cinefex was the special effects artists' Bible, essentially. It was a quarterly magazine that highlighted mostly fantastical type film, that genre. That's what it catered to. And it followed all the way up into the digital age and stuff. But man, in the early days, the stuff you could find on miniatures was nuts. Book number one, issue number one, which I have, and that is Star Trek the Motion Picture and Alien. And it's all about the models. And it has a lot of black and white photos back then because the effects companies just took black and whites most of the time. And then the one that is the holy grail of the Cinefex magazines, anybody guess which one that is? Guess, the whole issue was dedicated to that movie. And that movie came out in 1982. Yeah, Blade Runner. Man, that book, the Tyrell buildings, the models of those things, the spinners, you name it, the gun, everything was in there. And it was like tapping a vein. I'm not kidding you. This stuff was going in, and I would just start making it. And it was wrong. Like, it wasn't accurate because it's just a photo, right? So then I started sculpting. And the first thing I sculpted was the chest burster that came out of Kane and Alien. And I just made it out of plasticine. Found out that plasticine and varathane lacquer don't really work well together. It made a hard shell for a while. And it started to droop and sag. That was my first foray into sculpting with clay. I didn't know I could do it. Adam Savage calls himself a hard-edged sculptor, which is making models. And that I can do both, and I love it. And it has encompassed my entire life. I'm approaching 60, and it has been a part of my life the whole time. I passed it on through to my son. My son still makes models, not as much, but he loves film, and that working in film was not fun for me. I'm not wired for it, but what I learned was crazy. So, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
When you're painting structures like that, do you find it useful to consider a light source for it? Or you just consider how the building is painted,
Light source, that's fascinating. That's that awesome topic. So, everybody, who plays Games Workshop? Who does? Okay. The way they paint their miniatures is so unrealistic. Why? They're that big. You have to create the false light source in order to see the sculpture that's underneath it. Or you lose it. It disappears. And as we know today, the GW sculptures, oh man, compared to what they were in the 80s, they're incredible. I mean, I know they're a little bigger, because they started out quite like, if you look at an original Terminator, they're like this, and the new ones are like this. And the detail's nuts. So that lighting effect, it accentuates, it helps because it's so tiny. Because you can't create a real light source. So as you start getting larger, you can't paint like that. You can't do it because then you're looking at it going, should I have a black light for this thing and let it glow? Because then it doesn't look right. You've got, the highlights are too much. Because on a little mini, you got to really do the shadows and the highlights. You got to accentuate them a lot in order for that detail to come out so it doesn't just look flat. This thing, believe it or not, is not highlighted whatsoever. It's not dry brushed. I'm going to share a tip and a trick because I don't believe in keeping secrets. So on the roof here, you can see highlighting on the edge. That's actually not highlighting, that's weathering. And the weathering is, this would have been painted just with whatever paint they had back in the 1800s. It's probably lead-based, probably really bad. Doesn't weather very good, and it's basically in a tropical zone, so typhoons and stuff. The beating that happens on it would peel the paint. So that highlighting edges you're seeing on these ribs here is peeled paint. It does look like highlighting. For you guys back there, it probably looks really good. Up close, you can see that's just worn off. It's the paint is peeled, it's worn off. You can see rust and stuff on here. Well, wood doesn't rust. Of course it doesn't. These were made of metal. They used metal to assemble the roof lines, and the metal would be rusting. So I have the rust, the patina, and that soaking through. This staining here would be black mold. So I think of this sort of stuff because it's in a wet climate. So as you get larger, if you guys go to my table, you'll see an airship on the corner. Kind of, a lot of people said it looks like Jabba's palace, or Jabba's sail barge. It wasn't even inspired by that. That thing was inspired by a French curve, not the actress. That is inspired by drafting French curves. So the bottom of the hull, that shapes like this, is a French curve. And I had my French curves hanging on my wall, and I was looking at them, and I went like this. That's an airship shape, and that's how I made that. I won't be doing any highlighting on it whatsoever because it's large enough that natural light will do what it's supposed to do. But shadows you still have to put in because the small detail isn't enough to create a shadow, right? The light will do what it's supposed to do, but the shadow isn't there. You have to fake it. So you have to add it. So doing your oil stains, whatever it is. That model, the deck, is actually plastic. And I painted it and made it look like it was wood. And this is funny. I'm doing good. I got 10 minutes left. When I first made that and I painted the deck on it, my then wife said to me, "Why is the deck green?" I went, "It's not green." Well, I'm a model maker and a painter who happens to be colorblind. And I went, "It's not green. That's brown, man." And she said, "No, that's green." And I went downstairs and I'm looking, and I went, "Oh." And I grabbed the wrong bottle of Tamiya paint. And that my color blindness is really bizarre. This gentleman here is wearing camouflage. Okay, you see the colors in his pants there? I only see green. If there's brown in there, it's green. Okay, so olive drab and khaki are flipped. So when I look at a bottle of olives, they're brown. So when I did a stint in the military, and when we'd go on maneuvers, and there's two other guys in my unit that had the same color blindness. We could see the dudes that were hiding from us. The advantage to that color blindness. But it really sucks when you got to paint earthy tones. So I learned to teach myself to look at it in grayscale to get the color, temperature. And that's how I do it. And sometimes I need someone to say, I say, "Is that khaki or is that olive drab? What is that?" Because I don't know. I can't see it. Green I can see. I can absolutely see green if it's green. But if it's mixed with brown and it's earthy tones like that, it was difficult. I don't have a problem with it now. Come and talk to me on my table. I have a Tabletop World miniature there that I did for my patron who's sitting behind you guys. I'm pointing the finger at him. Mike's been an awesome friend. And that I've made many things for him. When you find someone that believes in you, embrace it, man. So anyways, the Tabletop World model there, I have a bunch of there's a bunch of groundwork on the sculpture that is rock. And I picked 4 or 5 different colors of earth tones to paint stone. Because if you look at stone, it's not black and gray. It's not 2 colors. There's at least 5 colors in there. There's blue. There's a blue-gray in there. There's brown. There's rust. There's all sorts of colors that are in stone. We're lucky that we live here. We can just drive out to Canmore and hang out in the mountains. Pick up stones. Look at them. And like you asked about the light question, look how light plays on it. Grab a small one and see how light plays on it. Because if you have a small one, then you know what details are in there that you can apply to your terrain making. Use the natural world in asymmetry, not symmetry. You know why the Millennium Falcon is not symmetrical? Because it looks cooler. That was George Lucas's reason. Joe Johnson said, "I'm going to make a hamburger that flies," and George Lucas said, "Put a pickle on the side of it." That's how they came up with it. Boba Fett's ship Slave One. Weird. Shouldn't fly, right? You know what that was made from? It's a light standard in California. So the big highway lights, they hang like this. It's the part that hangs down. It comes off the arm like this, comes down, drapes like this. That's Slave One. Joe Johnson was driving by and he saw it and he went, "That's Boba Fett's ship." Real world stuff. Any other questions? We're still doing good. I mean, I can go on forever. Go ahead.
What materials and references would you recommend for someone that would like to get into sculpting?
As in clay sculpture?
Yeah.
What do you like?
No, like what subject matter do you like?
What's your favorite subject matter?
People, unfortunately.
And people are really hard to sculpt.
The worst thing to sculpt, and feet. And feet are ugly, man. Doesn't matter how pretty your toes are, feet are ugly. And some feet, I don't know who, you guys, every one of us has got different feet. My feet, my second toe from my big toe is way longer than my big toe. I'm one of those freaks. And it's hard. So your best bet, anatomy books. Get anatomy and start from the skull up, skeleton out. Okay, so with practice, my partner, Rennie, she'll wave. Rennie, wave, my partner. When I met her, she was primarily just an illustrator. And I saw the way she painted, the way she draw. I said, you can sculpt. She was like, you're full of crap. I'm like, you can sculpt. Trust me. Gave her some clay. Guess what? She can sculpt. And she's got a whole bunch of sculptures on her table there that you can go and see amongst her paintings. We literally do art 24/7. When I'm not at my real job, that's all I do. And we're immersed in it. And what I taught Ren about doing figures is you gotta go from the skeleton, you gotta look at the musculature, and you build up from there. So study some forensic sculptors. Forensic sculptors are really cool. If I had the brains and not a problem with authority, I would have gone to school to be a forensic sculptor, because it is so cool, because they give you the skull of somebody and you have to figure out what they look like. And they give you height pins. So I think they're made of rubber, and they're just these little posts that are put all over so what they'll do today, this is even, okay, so the advent of 3D printing has made this wonderful. They don't have to take a human skull and mold it anymore. Then what they can do is scan it and then 3D print it and then give that to the artist, and then he puts these registration posts on. And those registration posts represent the depth of tissue. So it starts with the depth, and it's a standard depth, and you have to take into consideration body fat. You have to take into consideration, so a lot of times they'll know possibly the victim. They're trying to figure out if it is the victim, and that. So what they'll try and do is get their likeness as close as they can to visual accounts. People who said, or a photograph. If they have a photograph, even better. But most of the time there is no photographs. They have to figure out who this person was. So the posts, everybody has a certain same density of muscle thickness everywhere in their body. It's supposed to be this much. Now if it's a 6'8" man, it's going to be different. But they're going to know that, because they're going to know where the muscles attach on the bones, and they're going to know how thick the bone is, because the muscle attachment to the bone, as you age, that bone gets thicker. And that, because that attachment's pulling, and you're getting this interaction. We live in a world with gravity. That also plays into it. So these posts are used for a depth to put on the musculature. So they put on the muscle then, exactly the way human muscle looks, and that's in an artist anatomy book. You can find it in all of them. Then you put the skin on. And that. So what you can do, what I did for Rennie, I have 2 artists' busts, and they're 1/3 scale. And a friend of mine sculpted these, and it's just a generic female and a generic male. There's no hair on them or anything, and they're used for makeup artists to practice doing their prosthetics and that. But they're small, so you sculpt over top of a face that already exists. And that Ren and I are probably going to make those heads available. And then it's to honor my friend Jason too. He was a special effects artist in Vancouver. He worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger on 6th Day. Yeah, he hung out with him. He got to put stuff on him. It's pretty cool. And Jason actually got his name in Cinefex magazine. And he says, before I die, I want to be in Cinefex magazine. And he did it. It was pretty awesome. So this is kind of a tribute to him for other artists to have these head busts to practice sculpting. There is model kits of human skulls, but they're not quite adult size. They're transition between a child and a teen, and at this size. So it's quite small, but it's great for if you're going to sculpt a person that's that size. I think if you go on Thingiverse, maybe you can print human skulls now. So if you have access to 3D printers and stuff like that, whether it be resin or PLA, filament, and that, print yourself some skulls. Start sculpting. If you don't have access to that, artist books on anatomy, from skeleton to flesh. Every position. Black and white, illustrations are the best, okay? And use those as your base for sculpting. It's fun. And don't be hard on yourself the minute it doesn't work the first time, because we have a perception in our mind of what it's going to look like, and when it doesn't turn out that way, we get discouraged. That's normal. That always happens all the time. Because it's same if you're doing a drawing. It's like, well, that didn't come out exactly the way I had it in my head. It never does. It never does. So you have to go with the flow. You go with it. When I started making models for the oil patch, my ex-partner, he was ready to take a wrench and smack it across the back of my head, because I'm ADD, I'm obsessive compulsive and stuff, and really, really particular about what I'm making. If I don't like it myself, I can't give it to you. I had to separate myself from that. I had to learn they don't see what I see. So the oil patch, the first model I did for them was a coil tubing unit. We built 2 models, and it was for Frackmaster, which don't exist anymore. One model went to Russia, another model, and it came back. And then when BJ Well Services bought a Frackmaster, we had to repaint it from yellow to blue. That was a lot of fun. The model was 7 feet long, and there's a whole system. I have pictures of it actually at my table. It's a whole system of how they do horizontal drilling. And the final model, and it's still there, is in a museum in Dubai. So I was making a winch for the mast unit, and I'm sitting there on my little milling machine. I'm going on it, and Peter's like, dude, you don't need to put bolts. This is 1/32 scale. You're not going to see bolts. They're not going to count them. You don't need them. I still put them on there. And maybe somebody appreciated it, but I added a week to my job. So there's a point in time where you have to pull in the rein. When you're doing it for yourself, don't. If it's someone special, don't. You know, there's a limit to, you got to get stuff done. The point of doing it is getting it done. There's a maker that I follow, model making guru, Fox. He's a British guy. He's funny. And he builds kits, pretty much. That's all he builds is kits. And he says, don't let your stash pile up. You're supposed to make it. Meanwhile, this guy's got 450 unmade models sitting in his stash. So that's my time. If you got any more questions, please come and talk to me. I am on Instagram. I used to do the Facebook thing. I don't anymore. But come and follow me on Instagram. You can message me about anything, any queries whatsoever. One of the guys, Chris, is here from Ottawa, and he's dying to hear how I painted some of this stuff. So I'll be talking about that at my table. Thanks, everybody.
Hey everybody, amazing, right? Like the knowledge of this man, it just blows me away.
It hurts my head sometimes. I don't sleep.
So, Cliff, I want to say thank you very much for coming and sharing your knowledge with all of us. It's fantastic. We have a gift card here for you from PM Hobbycraft, which I thought you would appreciate. See, I knew it. One of our sponsors, PM Hobbycraft. If you guys have never been there, it's like a warehouse full of stuff for all this kind of model making, and it's amazing. They're super great.